Who were the Death Eaters? Welcome back. Here we take our time with the deep roots of the worlds we love. Harry Potter, The Lord of the Rings, A Game of Thrones, and others. You'll also find full audiobooks here. And if there's a question you've always wondered about, leave it in the comments. We do our best to answer. Right, let's begin. Who were the Death Eaters? At first glance, the answer seems simple. They were Voldemort's followers. But that description, is far too shallow. To understand them, we must look at how a handful of wizards became an army, how fear turned into faith, and how an idea, pure blood supremacy, was reshaped into a crusade. The Death Eaters were more than masked killers. They were the mirror of a society that had quietly allowed hatred to fester for centuries. The name itself appears for the first time in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, when Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Mad-Eye Moody, explains, "The Death Eaters walked free. I, their loyal servant, remained to ensure the Dark Lord's return." The phrase is chilling, Death Eater, implying not merely those who cause death, but those who consume it, who are nourished by it. Rowling's word choice tells us immediately that these people are bound not by friendship or family, but by a shared appetite for power over mortality. If we trace their origin backward, we arrive in the 1940s. Tom Riddle is still a student at Hogwarts, already charming professors, already experimenting with magic beyond his years. In The Half-Blood Prince we read, "He gathered about him a group of students, some of whom would later become known as the Death Eaters. These were ambitious young purebloods and half-bloods who admired his brilliance and mistook his coldness for strength. They called themselves his friends. In truth, they were his first test subjects. Among them were Avery, Mulciber, Lestrange, and a boy named Abraxas Malfoy. Riddle taught them that blood determined worth, that muggles were animals, and that weakness deserved extinction. The ideology was not new. Pure blood families had whispered it for generations. What Riddle added was focus, and fear. He took prejudice and forged it into a religion. When he left Hogwarts, Riddle vanished into the wider world, working for a time at Borgin and Burke's, collecting artifacts heavy with dark enchantments. Slowly, almost invisibly, he transformed his old circle of admirers into something organized. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, the symbol of the Dark Mark, a skull with a serpent for a tongue, was appearing in the sky over the homes of the murdered. The Death Eaters were no longer children. They were a movement. Their structure, if one can call it that, was cultic rather than military. Voldemort was the sole authority. His command was absolute. There were inner circle lieutenants, Lucius Malfoy, Bellatrix Lestrange, the Carrows, Dolohov, Yaxley, and dozens of lesser members whose loyalty wavered with fear. In the Goblet of Fire's graveyard scene, when Voldemort rises again, he calls them one by one, saying, 13 years it has been since last we met. Yet you answer my call as though it were yesterday. They kneel, each touching his wand to the mark on his arm, and the skin burns. This is not camaraderie, it is ownership. To join, one must take the Dark Mark willingly. It is a living brand that links every Death Eater to their master. When he presses his wand to his own mark, the others feel it sear and are compelled to apparate to his side. The magic is ancient, parasitic, almost symbiotic. It allows him to summon them and, if he wishes, to punish them. It is telling that their symbol combines death and serpent, the two things Voldemort venerates most: the power to kill and the creature that embodies rebirth through shedding skin. But who were these people beneath the masks? In Order of the Phoenix, when the Wizengamot tries to paint the entire Slytherin house as complicit, Dumbledore reminds them that evil is a choice, not a heritage. Yet it is true that most Death Eaters came from ancient families: Malfoy, Lestrange, Crabbe, Goyle, Nott. Wealth protected them as long as the Ministry preferred denial to confrontation. There were exceptions, of course: Severus Snape, born to a Muggle father, and Regulus Black, who joined out of family expectation rather than conviction. But the core remained aristocratic. They believed that their blood entitled them to rule. The films show this vividly. In Deathly Hallows Part 1, at Malfoy Manor, the Death Eaters dine while a suspended Muggle studies professor begs for her life. Voldemort kills her mid-sentence, and the others laugh. It's theatrical, yes, but not inaccurate. By this point, the group had become a theatre of cruelty, each member proving loyalty through displays of violence. Bellatrix Lestrange, the most fanatical of all, embodies that worship of pain. Her laughter at Sirius's death and her exclamation, "I killed Sirius Black," in Order of the Phoenix, show a woman who has lost herself entirely to the cause. During the First Wizarding War, the Death Eaters operated through terror cells. They infiltrated the Ministry, assassinated opponents, and targeted Muggleborns. Their influence reached into every level of society. The Order of the Phoenix formed in response, Dumbledore's quiet army of those who refused to bow. The war ended with Voldemort's fall in 1981, when the killing curse rebounded from the infant Harry Potter. Many Death Eaters claimed they had been bewitched or coerced. Others, like Bellatrix and the Lestranges, went proudly to Azkaban. The prisons were full, yet the ideology remained unbroken, sleeping like a disease beneath the surface. 13 years later, when Voldemort returned, the mark burned once more. The faithful came crawling back. In that same graveyard scene, he taunts them. "Some of you are too cowardly to return. Others are dead, and yet others believed me gone forever." It is a moment of revelation. They do not serve out of loyalty. They serve because they are afraid. His power is the glue that binds them, not love, not friendship, certainly not gratitude. Even within their ranks, treachery is common. Snape spies on them for Dumbledore. Wormtail betrays his friends and then cowers for protection. Lucius Malfoy's pride curdles into terror after the debacle at the Department of Mysteries. The Death Eaters are a house of masks, each afraid of being the next to fall. And yet, for all their corruption, they are effective. By the middle of Deathly Hallows, they control the Ministry, the Daily Prophet, even Hogwarts itself through the Carrows. Their system relies on fear and bureaucracy in equal measure. Laws against Muggleborns, snatchers on every road, propaganda about blood status. Voldemort rarely appears in public. His presence is felt through them. In this sense, the Death Eaters are not just his followers, they are his method. He extends himself through their obedience, the way a parasite extends tendrils through a host. Psychologically, the group operates like a cult. Scholars in the wizarding world, Bathilda Bagshot for instance, might note how Voldemort isolates his followers from empathy. Each initiation requires murder or betrayal. In Half-Blood Prince, we see Draco Malfoy given the impossible task of killing Dumbledore. The purpose is not victory, it is corruption. Once you have killed for him, you can never go back. That is the genius of his cruelty. It is also worth noting who didn't join. Not all Slytherins were Death Eaters. Not even all pure-blood supremacists were. Some, like Horace Slughorn, prized talent over blood. Others, like the Weasleys, rejected the ideology outright. The fact that Voldemort could not claim universal support within his supposed constituency shows the limits of his charisma. He ruled by terror, not by faith freely given. When the Second Wizarding War finally collapses at the Battle of Hogwarts, the Death Eaters break with their master almost instantly. Many throw down their wands the moment he falls. In the Deathly Hallows, we read simply, Voldemort was dead, killed by his own rebounding curse, and those who had followed him fled or surrendered. The movement, built on fear, dies with the source of that fear. Some are imprisoned again. Azkaban reopens its doors. Others claim the imperious curse as defense. A few, like the Malfoys, survive by renouncing him. The mark on their arms fades to a scar, but the stain on history remains. So, who were the Death Eaters? They were the product of a culture that valued purity more than compassion, power more than principle. They were the heirs of Grindelwald's ideology, stripped of its idealism and left with only its cruelty. They were the reflection of Voldemort's own soul, fragmented, fearful, incapable of love. Each bore the dark mark not only on the skin, but in the heart. In the films, the visual of that brand searing into flesh is striking. In the books, it is subtler, yet more terrifying. A bond that turns men and women into extensions of another's will. When Harry touches the dying Snape and sees the swirl of memories, we understand the tragedy of one Death Eater who broke free too late. Snape's Patronus, the Silver Doe, stands as proof that even those who fall deepest into darkness can still choose remorse. It is a rare redemption among them. Perhaps that is the final lesson. Evil on that scale does not spring from nowhere. The Death Eaters were raised in households that taught them pride as virtue, secrecy as safety, and obedience as tradition. Voldemort merely harvested what was already growing. In that sense, every Death Eater is both villain and symptom. Their story warns the wizarding world that darkness thrives not only in forbidden curses, but in the everyday comfort of prejudice, left unchallenged. If you've stayed with me to the end, thank you. Here we keep exploring these hidden layers of the worlds we love. You'll find audiobooks here: Harry Potter, The Lord of the Rings, A Game of Thrones, and others, and deeper dives into questions like how many Horcruxes did Voldemort truly intend? Or what really lies beyond the veil in the Department of Mysteries? Leave your question below. I read them all. And perhaps remember this line from Dumbledore, delivered quietly in Order of the Phoenix. We are only as strong as we are united, as weak as we are divided. The Death Eaters forgot that, and so did their master. When unity is built on fear, it shatters with the first breath of courage. Thank you for listening. Until next time.